All right, we went into the next phase of this. We're right in the middle of the page of Tes. We'll start in the line that begins HaKoiches, HaDover Shebnisanek Boy. We took great pains to explain the phenomenon of Oyneg as it is experienced and recognized in all the koiches.
So, can you repeat where we are? I didn't hear.
We are in the middle of Page Chavtes. The line begins HaKoiches.
Okay. Good.
We went a little further yesterday, but this is where we're up to. This long discussion centrally it was the Yin HaChochma. To point out how Chochma is instrumental in bringing the Nefesh into all the koiches. But along with that, we got a very strong, powerful message that in all the koiches there is an Inyan of Oyneg. This Oyneg is what maintains or what gives chayas and presence to the koiches. And that this Oyneg is not an isolated Oyneg within that koyach. Rather, this is the Oyneg that is actually present in the Nefesh itself. The Nefesh is the source of life, clearly, in the person. And that source of life is present not only in terms of being the source of life, but also being the source and the force that maintains and gives presence to all the koiches. Now, I want to kind of have a clear a focus on the meaning of these words. It's a source of life, a source of Oyneg. Oyneg is something which we all know what it is firsthand. When you eat a pleasant piece of food, you have Oyneg. And usually, the way we perceive it, the real thing is the food that we are eating. The Oyneg, this is just our personal experience. It has nothing to do with the reality of what's taking place. And the reason we perceive it this way is that in our physical world, in our physical orientation, the tangible is considered real. The intangible is considered unreal. It is entirely subjective. It is your personal like and dislike. It has nothing to do with the reality. This is the way the world operates. This is the way we view things in the world. And what we must understand is that this is not the case, this is not true, and we have to understand to the extent to which it is not true. We even pointed out on the simplest level that when a person eats food that he is turned off by, it will not have its proper effect. It will not be nourishing to him because his system will reject it. It will not be able to absorb it. So this is entirely on the physical experiential level. Then when we go again into the more intangible and more spiritual aspect, we have the nefesh. And the similar thing occurs, similar misunderstanding is right there in the nefesh itself, to the extent that it is possible even to ignore and deny the presence of nefesh. Rahman al-Islam, when a person is depressed, and depression, we know, is a very terrible thing. He loses chayas, and ultimately it can very well affect his physical well-being. So the tendency, of course, at this time, it has been already understood much deeper, but the tendency is, this is a chitzonistic thing. Give him a little bit of an exciting activity, some excitement, and that's it. This whole thing will dissipate. There's not a real significance to this. And by inference, we are saying the same thing about life itself. It's a good experience, but we have to focus in and see clearly. The nefesh is what the goof lives by. The nefesh is what maintains the presence of the goof. Not for the nefesh, the goof would cease to exist, not only cease to operate, but cease to exist. This should or can, if we are intelligent, if we focus in, change our entire perception of worldly existence. Worldly existence is not worldly at all. There's a spirit, there's a nefesh, there's a godly will that gives it presence. That is what world is. Except that that itself is reduced and further reduced into kelim and sub-kelim and so forth, until the chayus is hidden within the kelim. That is the union of the world. But the real thing is the way it comes milmailo, top down. That top down, this is spirit and this is physical. The physical exists because the spirit exists. That's an important thing to understand, and this is quite challenging. As I said, to the extent that it is, people have a difficulty identifying that there is such a thing as a nefesh. Thus, oineg, that is the essence of everything. Why is oineg the essence of everything? Because oineg carries in it the spirit of the nefesh. Why this is, I'm taking it a step further. I'm not going to discuss it too much, but just pointing out the phenomenal Ayin in this. Why is nefesh manifest through oineg? Because nefesh itself carries the godly spirit. That's what nefesh is. And that is oineg. As I said, not going to carry it much further up, not at this point anyway. But we have to understand the significance of this whole discussion. And finally, the Rebbe points out that the oineg that is imbued, mislabesh. Mislabesh means it becomes part and parcel of the koyach. Is actually that very same oineg spirit that is in the nefesh itself. And this is what brought us to understand that has to go through a hagbola, because nefesh and koyach are shaloi be'erach. And we explained this briefly over these weeks and yesterday. There's a shaloi be'erach, that nefesh should be slavish in a particular koyach, in particular activity. And here comes in the phenomenal fact of chokhmah. Now, chokhmah is an efficient, a phenomenal link between the essential element of nefesh and the functional element of koyches. And in brief, we have already, Baruch Hashem, spent a lot of time and we already discussed it from every angle. In brief, the beetle element in Chokhmah enables it to sense the truth of nefesh. That's the beetle element. Then the presence element of Chokhmah enables it to translate that truth into Mitzias of world. Again, one would ask, beetle, what do you get by beetle? You get nothing. You get a sense of something. What's the value of a sense? You're in the physical world. You need something tangible. That sense, this is what maintains everything in existence. How so and so forth, this is not for now. But first we have to realize the phenomenal factor of this, and the fact of this, and the truth of this. This is what we always say. Just to get a glimpse, just to get a sense of something, is worth all the effort. Like we point out in a very simple thing, in the physical way, that sight is of paramount importance. If somebody was sighted, and then Nachman he lost his sight, he still has that effect, even though he doesn't see it. Because that sense of reality has already been experienced, and it has its effect on his life. Okay. Having said all that, we will now be able to go into the next phase of this, which is even more subtle and more spiritual and more intangible. Okay, we go now inside, and the line begins with what HaKoich is.
It's just one thing I didn't grasp. This sense of bitul, how does it come into the what we said before, the link before nefesh and guf? Where does this sense of bitul intervene?
The sense of bitul enables chokhmah to sense the truth, the absolute truth of nefesh.
Okay.
Why bitul? Because to understand that truth is impossible. You can only sense it through bitul. And if you are a yesh, you won't sense it. Because a yesh can only relate to that which you can grasp. Chokhmah doesn't need to grasp it. Even as it is, as we discussed, in the nefesh hativi, the natural nefesh, which is essentially what we were discussing till now, the life, the nefesh life in the human being as it is affected through the body, to the koiches that function in the body, in the guf. And the nefesh hativi gives life to the guf. In a moment, we will contrast it to what we're going to say. Similarly, this is also true in the godly oineg, horuchni, the spiritual oineg, b'neshama ha'elokis, in the neshama ha'elokis, in the godly soul. Nefesh hativi and neshama elokis. What is TV versus eloki? TV means that aspect in nefesh, in life, that is identified as a presence, a metzius in its own. Like we say all the time, say that there is life in the human being, and the human soul really is supreme amongst all living beings. But there is a similarity, because the goof lives from that soul, physical. And in that respect, the nefesh that gives life to the animal has a certain level of similarity. So to understand nefesh hativi, it's easier for us to focus on the nefesh of the animal. Although, again, in the human being, it's in a much finer manner.
How did you define TV as the life element is already there? How did you understand? I just missed it on that.
TV means a metzius, presence, natural. What does natural mean? Natural means that there is, normally natural means cause and effect. If I kick this watch, it's going to move. Not because the watch moves away from my finger, but because there was a force that made it cause it to move. There's a nefesh atid, a nefesh that is a presence, and if this nefesh is put into a body, the body comes to life. Like we're saying, the nefesh habheima, nefesh habal chai. Nefesh habal chai, it's also a living thing. But the life there is a life that can readily and fully relate to the physicality of the body. It completely unites with the physicality of the body. And when you separate them life from the body, there's nothing left of the body. There's no independent presence of this life. This life gives life, understands body life. There's no body, there's no life. This is why we say that about Baal Chai, we define the life of Baal Chai is that it's a living body, because primarily it's a body. It's a living body. That is the Baal Chai.
If you don't find it, we just went through the whole discussion, right, about nefesh order, which starts with Chochmah, and we dealt with all this stuff. Now we're talking about the nefesh, which does not have any of that stuff, right?
So this was nefesh hativi. Tivi by definition means it's a natural presence. It is a presence to it. In that itself, there is great level, great variety. Even a tree has a nefesh. A tzemeach van nefesh hatzemachas. And the truth is, as we learn in Chassidus, and it says in Arizal, that there is a nefesh hadememes. In everything there's a nefesh. Once we come to this, it forces us to focus and understand what does this nefesh represent. I think nefesh hadememes. It says nothing. So in what way is it a nefesh? it makes a statement that everything that exists because there is a koyach eliki in it. The nefesh is this memutze, is how the koyach eliki comes into the world. Nothing exists on its own. It exists because there's a koyach eliki in it. That is the nefesh. And in that there are different levels. There's nefesh at the memes, nefesh at the machas, nefesh al-chaya, and then lahavdil you could say there's a nefesh hamlaberes, nefesh ha'odam. Nefesh ha'odam, nefesh at-tivis at this level is also really a nefesh that is part of world. Except within world, this reigns supreme.
That's where we are now. Ukmoshe ubenefesh tivi. Is that we meant to understand something what we've been saying about how it is in the natural soul?
Yeah.
Namely, we were talking about oneg and chokhmah.
That's right. In nefesh hativi there is oneg, and there is chokhmah, and this is how it ultimately trickles down into all the koiches.
That's still tivi.
That's called tivi.
Oneg sounds like the real deal. Chokhmah itself is the real deal coming into consciousness.
That's right. And yet, relative to what to nefesh holiki, this is TV.
So seriously, this is my question. I want to know if
No, you're not ready for the question.
Okay, fine. Okay.
I heard you.
Okay, sorry.
We haven't made a point. What's the difference of nefesh holiki? Come on, at least one sentence. Give me a chance.
All up till now has been tivi.
This whole discussion fits in the nefesh hativis, and it's easy for us to relate to nefesh hativis on that level. Even though it is a nefesh, and even though it is nefesh ha'odam, and there is the union of oinet, and there is the union of chokhmah, it still is nefesh ha'odam. And then we come to nefesh ha'olikis and say this is completely different. This is mamash and in ruchni shaloi be'erach in ganz. Totally. Since time is catching up with us, just want to give you a little food for thought for the day. That's all we have time for. We said that in the nefesh hadei memes, if I kick the watch is going to move, not because the watch moved away from my hand, and because it got the message. So you better move away. No message. There's a force that hit it, made it move. The same is true, never I'd say machas, although over there's some difference already. Nefesh ha'chaya, nefesh ha'balchai. You hit a balchai, he feels the hit, and he moves on his own. So in a sense, he gets the message. But he moves away not because it's the right thing to move, because he understands the message. It's still on the Nefesh HaDememes level, but there is a kind of a real interaction there. He senses, he feels it. Nefesh HaDememes doesn't feel it. Then there is Ha'odom. Ha'odom, you don't even have to hear him. Ha'odom is much more sensitive. And if you tell him, this is my place, he'll move. Why will he move? Because he doesn't want to have a conflagration. He doesn't want to have unpleasantness of argument. There's something personal involved, even though it is human. Yeah, you want me to move? I'll move. Do we see how Teva is involved in this?
How Tev is involved in
In this which I'm describing right now. Even though it's a seichel thing.
It's in response to the.
It is a response, and it's a response based on my mitzias. There's a Teva element in this.
Oh, it's not that this is really your space. It's to avoid the arguments.
It's not the ultimate truth.
It's not right. It's not emes eliki.
In other words, you make the distinction between what you were learning, saying before that the person is able to own a piece of property in the world because he's, Abishon gave him essential presence. That's not what you're talking about now. Now we're talking about the personal kind of, what you just said in your own words, right?
The way Nefesh HaTivis recognizes it is on a Teva level, even though there is plenty of intelligence in it. Let's remember our Tivis. Tivis means there's a presence. The presence may be a true presence, but it's a presence. Elikis is in a completely different realm. There's absolutely nothing compelling about it altogether. And that we will have to leave for the next time. Have a good day. Go to the closing shot for this.
Torture.
What's a torture?
No, because I see, I see the depth in it, but you're not explaining it, and I don't understand it. I mean, because I see that there is a distinction between what we were speaking before about this whole, for just like example of ownership of the attributes of the human being being the Eibishter's representative here, and here you're clearly discussing the lower level of it, meaning lower aspect of that. So we must make a distinction then there is that intellectual.
Avram, you're not functioning with your chochmah, functioning with your hands. How do I grasp this?